Okay guys, welcome to today's tutorial in which I'm going to be teaching you how to create draped clothes and dropped clothes. So you may have seen one or two products in the past with wash day clothes, and there was one once at Daz for some silly amount of money of clothes like this that are just draped on the floor. But the trouble with commercial products is that they don't necessarily drape the products that your figures have been using. So for example, here's a t-shirt. Now if this guy had been wearing this t-shirt in a scene, maybe I'm making a series of scenes, and then in the next scene I want him to take this t-shirt off, that's all well and good, but if I'm using a commercial product, it's not going to have the correct patterns and stuff on it to look realistic. So perhaps we're making a beach scene or a bedroom scene, or perhaps somebody's having a shower and hanging something up on a coat hook, such as these trousers. So I'm going to just show you some very easy ways to create these and some not so easy ways. And we're going to go over some of the issues. So these all here are draped objects that I've created and saved to my props library. But let's get straight on and actually make a prop. So I'll just save that scene. So a word of warning, there's going to be a lot of jump cuts today because a lot of this rendering takes ages and ages to do, a lot of the simulations, and also I'm going to be hopping back and forwards between examples, and I just don't want to keep you waiting while I do so. So let's just start with a new document. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to load an item of female clothing called casual, classic casual. So I'll just drag this into here so that you can see. So it's this item here. It's Victoria 4, and I'm going to load the classic casual shirt. So load that into the scene there. Now, what we have here is just a shirt which would auto conform if Victoria was in this, which we could auto conform by dropping it onto her, or we could conform it to her by going up to here and then doing conform and choose the figure. In this case, we don't have a figure to conform it to, but that's fine because we just want to create it as a discarded piece of clothing. So there's two ways we can do this. I could just go straight to the cloth room and clothify this item here. But there's a reason not to do that, and I'll show you what it is. Let's go cloth, new simulation, simulation create, clothify. Now what I have to do is clothify every single one of the body parts individually, which is a pain in the butt. So here's a much better way of doing it. I'm going to cancel that, delete that simulation. I'm going to take this shirt and I'm going to export it as an OBJ, wavefront OBJ. So export that, ensure that just the shirt that we want, and then export that. And I can name it whatever I want. I'm going to leave weld body part seams on and include body part names in polygon groups. Okay, you may wish to turn all of these on as well, which may matter later on if you have a multi-material object. So this is easy. It's just a single material applied to all of the different parts. But supposing you had a belt and different straps and they all had different material zones, then you're going to need this stuff turned on as well. So I export that, and this is classic casual here. So I've actually already exported it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete that figure, and I'm now going to import the model that I just created. So you can leave it centered or not centered. It will, if you don't have it centered, it will import into the scene wherever you exported. But I think it's easier to have centered because it'll always come into the view at the center point. You could place on floor here as well. And now I'm going to do classic casual. And there you are, drop straight to the floor. And now you'll see as I move the cursor over it, there's no body parts anymore. It's just a single object. So what I'm going to do, go to cloth, new simulation. Now, these three parameters are very important. For now, we're going to leave them all off because each one of them dramatically increases the amount of time for the simulation. The one that you're most likely to need is cloth self-collision, and you'll see with this shirt that that's actually a situation where it might be needed. So For now, we're going to leave them off. These two here, vertex against cloth and polygon against cloth, prevent the mesh from tearing. We're not going to need that for now, but if you have a problem where the mesh tears and the polygons, if I quickly show you the polygons of this mesh, sometimes as it starts to deform, these polygons will tear apart from each other. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is select Clothify. So I've just created new simulation. I've just left it on the default name for now. And now I do Clothify, and the only object in the scene is Classic Casual. I suggest that you don't have multiple objects in this scene when you do the simulation, just to keep it simple. And we do Clothify there. And now here's the next thing, Collide Against. Now, there's various ways that you could do this. By default, I'll set a collision against a floor or a plane that I've created underneath. So I'm just going to select ground, and I'm going to do OK. However, you could have different objects to create drapes. Supposing you've got a couple of characters who have leapt into bed in a passion and discarded their clothes, and some of them are hanging off the edge of the bed or a chair or something like that. You could drape them against the chair instead, or as well. So you could have a ground here and a bed here, and you could choose to add the bed to that as well. You can add multiple objects. So we select OK. I'm just going to go back to my shaded view. And now all we need to do is calculate simulation. Now this is the bit that can be quite slow. Now this shirt is extremely well behaved, which is why I've chosen it. But already you probably saw something weird happen there. So if I just go to the animation scrubber here, by default this is set up for 30 frames of animation, which is NTSC 1 second. So look what happens here. Watch, see, that's getting poked through now. Now, had I set up object self-collision, that wouldn't happen. But something else interesting happens at the bottom of the simulation. This has not fallen fully to the ground. So we're just going to do two things here. We're going to clear the simulation and reset. Then we're going to go into simulation settings. First of all, I'll do cloth self-collision, and we'll run that simulation again. As you see straight away, that's significantly slower. It's not too bad with this figure. The amount of polygons and the complexity of the figure itself dramatically increases the time of the simulation. So I deliberately chose this t-shirt because it's going to be quite simple, but already you can see it's slowing down now as this kind of chest is poking against the front of the shirt is falling against it. And you see now that's not poking through anymore, that's kind of wrapping over. And maybe a little bit of poke through there. No, that kind of looks okay. Let's have a look. Is that poking through? No, I think that's just the cloth bending there. Right, so that's slightly different simulation that time. Now, there's one more thing that we can do is I'm just going to go back to simulation settings again. I'm going to turn that off because I just want it to simulate quicker. And I'm going to clear and reset. Now this time, what I want to show you is that you remember that it didn't simulate all the way down to the ground. It kind of held itself up. So what I need is more simulation frames. So I could add more frames to the animation here by going to here and changing this value here to say 50 or 60. So it would be a 2-second animation. But what I'm going to do is a different way of doing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do simulation settings, drape frames. And this is basically adding frames to the front of the animation without actually affecting the animation length. So what I'll do here is I'll add 20 frames here, and then I'm going to calculate drape. And this is draping, but it's still in the first frame. Okay. So we're in frame 1, and that's already draped down that far. Ignore this poke through. So now I'll calculate the simulation. And again, it's going to calculate that drape, but it's going to add another 20 frames of animation at the end. So that kind of collapses down a bit more. Now, you might say, supposing this animation here, I'm now going to turn that drape off just to keep it back to a quicker simulation. You might say, well, that looked a bit stiff, that material. So what you can do is decrease the fold resistance here. So I'll just turn that to 1 instead of 5. We can also change the cross density and the friction and stuff like that, but we'll just do the fold resistance for now and run that simulation again. And you should see that it's a little bit softer looking now. So this is more kind of silky looking. See the way that collapses more into a kind of a mess? Okay, so here's our finished simulation. Now, one more thing that I suggest you do. The simulation depends upon the number of polygons. If I show here the hidden line, you'll see there's really not a lot of polygons in this item of clothing. And so you can get very jagged simulation edges here. If I just zoom in a bit, actually easier to do it this way and zoom in this way. Okay, so you can see there's some kind of jagged simulation edges there. So what I'll do is go into properties and just increase the subdivision by 1 or 2 if you need it. See how that's made that nice and soft? So if I go back to shaded now, that kind of looks okay. Now, here's the next thing that you do. This is really important. Don't save this simulated version to your library. Okay, so if I go to my library here, what I've got here is my props library, and I can save to the library here. But look what happens if I save that straight to the library. I'll just do a plus, and we'll call this test, and it will save that. Now, I'm going to do one more thing. This finished simulation, this is where it's really useful. What I recommend is that you build up a library of discarded clothes. Sorry, actually one more thing that I will just say before I do this. Before you do your final export, which I'm about to do now, ensure that your clothing item has a texture on that you want. Okay, so in this case, it's the default texture. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export that again as a wavefront object, classic casual, and I don't need to do all of that texture stuff this time. And here we are, classic casual draped, which I've already done. Now, let me show you why I did that. If I go into my library, I'll do it this way, excuse me. If I go into my library and load the test that I saved here, you'll see that it saves the default object. It doesn't save the simulation. However, if I load that by importing, and we called it classic casual, was it classic casual draped? Yes, classic casual draped. It saves the simulated version without the simulation. So it saves the final version. And now I can just go from there. In my props library here, I can just go plus to save. And now if I do, we'll call this test 2. I'll delete that. And there's test 2. And when I load that, the simulation's proper. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of caveats to this. So what I'm going to do is make a comparison here of 4 different shirts. So we've got baby doll, we've got, which is a kind of a halter top. We've got Bear's Liberty, which is a kind of a nice button t-shirt. We've got classic casual, which I showed you before. And we've got one more faith vest. Here we go. Or is that it? Okay, where's that gone? Oh, there we go. Right. So that one took a time to load. Okay, so 3 of these are unsimulatable. And this is where the problem comes in. And let me explain why. First of all, I'll show you in hidden line. So it's down to the complexity of the figures and the way that they're created. So if you look at this classic casual, you'll see it's a single piece. Let me make sure that we're rotating around that object. So that's a single piece there. There's no add-ons, there's no nothing. Now, if I look at this baby doll top, there's these straps. This is created separately to this. Now, if I look at this Bear's Liberty, you'll see there's these little loops. There's these buttons. And if I look at the Faith top, you'll see there's a zip and then there's the body. And what you'll find is that these three just will not simulate. What will happen is when you try to simulate this one, so this is Bear's Liberty, the simulation will just fail because it's, I don't know, it just fails, okay? When you try and simulate this one, the straps go flying off into space. When you try and simulate this one, the zip stays up in the air and doesn't simulate with the body. So not everything can simulate. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you also a pair of trousers called Cold Life, which is a pair of jeans for Michael. So I'm just going to load those so that I don't waste your time. So what we have here is a pair. What we have here is a pair of jeans called Cold Life. And again, you can see a classic example of a simulation that will go badly. This actually will simulate, but what you have here is a belt, buttons, belt loops, and then the denim material. And the belt, if it were a proper simulation, should be stiffer with a kind of some kind of rigid body or something like that on it, or at least a different stiffness. You'd have to create a different simulation group for that. Then you'd have to create a different simulation group for that. But here's the problem. If I now go into 3D Studio Max and load that pair of trousers, so I've exported it as an object. So what did I say? It was Cold Life. So I'm going to import it as a single mesh, but I want you to see something. So here's Cold Life in 3D Studio Max. We'll go Alt W to show the whole thing, and you can see that these are different parts here, different colors. But if I now go into Editable Poly and select this, which is the element. So what this means is that it will enable me to select it. So first of all, if I do this, for example, you can see that I've got vertices there. I can select different vertices. Here I could select polygons. Here I could select edge loops, and here I'm going to select elements. So elements are different components that were essentially grouped into a single object. So first of all, we've got the trousers, the jeans. Now you can see, look, the pockets, the button, the fly, the button, the belt loops, and the belt's actually all part of the main thing, but everything else is all separate objects. So when you simulate this pair of trousers, all of these objects will fly off the simulation. Now, if you really, really know what you're doing, you could join these by welding in your 3D package. I don't think it would be worth the effort, but supposing you have a scene where it's super, super important, you could attach these various parts and then literally weld the vertices together so that they were all part of the same contiguous object. I wouldn't do it, but you know, it depends on how important it is to you. I would suspect if you're that good at working your way around it, you'd just do a simulation in 3D Studio or Blender or whatever. Okay, so back to the simulation. Now I want to show you a really, really cool thing that you can do. So it is draping. So here's a pair of pants, and I've already done it, so I don't have to show you I will show you the build process in a minute. But what we have here is a pair of trousers. Now imagine that somebody's just taken these off and you want them to be holding the pair of trousers hanging out of their hands. Look at this great simulation. Oops, a daisy. See how that drapes from that point? That point doesn't hang down. And there's a really easy way to do that. What you're going to do, in fact, I'll do it from scratch. So I'm going to load the object that I want to do that to. So we'll use the same trousers. So that was classic casual pants. There they are. Right. And now I'm going to load a collision object. So in this case, I'm going to load a cylinder. Okay, it's wrong scale, so I'm just going to scale it right down till it's narrow enough and then increase the Y scale. And I'm going to rotate that minus 90-ish. There you go, 91, doesn't really matter. Z, so it's in the middle of the trousers. Move it into position. You'll see here, it's poking all the way through. Now I'm going to do a cloth simulation. So I've selected the pants. I do cloth, delete the previous simulation. New simulation, clothify the pants, classic casual pants. You'll see that the other prop there is a cylinder that I added. So now I'm going to collide them, and this is where you can do multiple objects against the ground and that cylinder, this cylinder here. And now, hopefully I just clicked OK there. When I calculate my simulation, that acts as a hold point, a friction point, and it drapes from there. So obviously I'd need to do more frames there for it to look good, but you see the idea. Now, let me show you a situation where you need to be careful. Okay, so we have two cloth planes. This is also a great idea if you want to do a draped towel or a tablecloth or something. The classic is a tablecloth. That's what the high-res square is for. So if I look in my poser primitives, you'll see there's a square high-res there. There's also a square up here. Where is it? I can't find it. Square here. Okay. But the high-res square is for tablecloths and towels. So this is a high-res square. This is the regular square. So when I run that simulation, look what happens. Using the same technique, you'll see this one does nothing. Well, kind of just droops. And the reason is, if I view that in hidden line wireframe, the high-res square has got lots of polygons. The low-res square doesn't. It's just a single polygon. Now, I could fix that, and that brings us back to the subdivision. I could fix that by subdividing this square here. So if I go into this and then subdivide that, there you go, it's about the same number of squares now. Now I'll go into my cloth simulation, reset that, clear simulation. So now they have a similar number of frames. Hopefully it'll just work straight away. No, okay. So I would need to export this square with more with the subdivision to get that to work, I guess. Let me just see if I can try it by doing unclothifying. Okay, now I'm going to clothify square one, clothify cloth plane. So I'm assuming this is cloth plane and this is square one. Collide against. It's already retained that cylinder one and cylinder two by the looks of it. Let's try that one more time. No, okay, so I would need to save that subdivided square in order to get a good result, and then re-import it and simulate that. Generally speaking, you wouldn't want to subdivide before simulating anyway, because every extra polygon takes more time to simulate. Okay, let me just see if there are any more things that I need to think about. I talked about adding materials before we simulate. Okay, now let me show you a situation where it's really important. So let me open stockings. Oh, yes, here's a simulation again. I've got a pair of stockings here. In fact, 3 pairs that I've re-imported. So I've gone through the process of saving the original item, exporting it and re-importing it. And now you'll see, what I want you to notice here is that the angle of your initial simulation also makes an effect. So this one could be somebody's a lady is walking away and draping her stockings as she runs to the bedroom. This could be a lady getting dressed at the getting changed at the beach or for a shower, and she just drops her stockings. And this is a bed or a chair or something. So as you can see, boom, and they all work quite nicely with a low friction value and sheerness values. But what I want you to see here, if I import the stocking model that I created, what I want you to see, in fact, I'm just going to clear this a sec. I'm just going to do a new one. If I do import and superhose, so superhose. So here's the stockings. It appears to have no textures, which is not actually true. So let me just show you something, because this is quite important to understand for other things that you might be doing as well. Other times when you export in OBJ format, especially if you're exporting for say DAZ Studio. So if I load the original stocking model, so where is it? It's here we go, superhose, HF superhose. So if I take that model and just translate it to the side using the hips, okay, this we'll just drop that to the ground. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to add a texture. So first of all, I'll add some transparency, and then I'll color that transparency. So this pair of stockings has this exact same texture on. Yet if I render it, you'll see that it doesn't render the same, because it's not added the transparency and the color properly. So here's a solution. And if the model has a single texture for the whole model, it's much easier. What I'd do is I'd reload this original model. Then I'd go into material, copy the material there, and now go to this material. So I'm in the preview screen. I'm going to use the eyedropper to select that. Right click, select all, and replace. Now I'm going to right click again and do apply to all, which you'll see. I'm pointing at the screen again. What an idiot. You'll see this has only applied this to the hip area, not the legs and the feet and blah, blah, blah. So as I say, in this particular case, that texture applies evenly to the whole body. So all I'm just going to do is apply to all. And now that's applied that to the whole figure. Now, if I save that figure in Poser, if I now save this pair of stockings, it will have the texture properly applied. Now, where it can become more complicated is if you've got a texture that's got multiple texture parts, say could be a pair of shorts with a pair of skin tight something underneath, and then a cuff, which is a different material again. And you'd have to manually select each body part and transfer it across, which can be a bit tedious. But then once you've done that, you can then just save that prop and it will have the material that you created for it. So let me just have a look at my list to see if there's any more things that I'm missing. No. So just remember then, when you're looking for things to simulate, no straps, belts or buttons, and ideally clothing or models at a single piece. This is great for creating tablecloths, towels, items. As I said, you can have items in people's hands. I imagine you could probably even use this in some way for a whip, although I've never thought about how you'd accomplish it. Anyway, guys, I hope you found that interesting. So that's a way to create a library of draped clothes. So if I now go down to here, you'll see here's my library. I've got classic casual, a nice t-shirt model there, a shirt, speedos, stockings, and draped pants, plus the 2 tests we did. I actually have a much bigger library than that, but that's in a different library. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. You take care, and I'll speak to you later.